I've been asked to address the question, is religion a spiritual science? This is supposed to be the kind of common question that people ask. Well, in response to that, my first question would be, what do you understand by the word religion? What do you understand by the word spiritual? What do you understand by the word science? People ask questions, but they may not be qualified even to ask the question. If we ask people, what do you mean by religion? It's one of those things that people know what it means in a general way, but if you think about it, it's very difficult to define. Just like mind. Everyone knows what the phenomenon of mind is, but if we ask someone to define it exactly, it becomes very difficult. The word good or bad, everyone has a general idea of what these words mean, but exactly, specifically, if you try to define it, it's very difficult. So religion, people in general have a vague idea, well, religion is something that people who are good, they go to temples or churches or mosques and they do good for others and they don't do bad things. But exactly what do you mean by religion? People think there's Hindu religion, Christian religion, Muslim religion. It's considered to be some kind of faith. The word dharma in Sanskrit, in modern Indian languages, has substituted for the English word religion. In Sanskrit, dharma and the English word religion, they don't exactly translate. Dharma means, well, it has several meanings. Core meaning is that which sustains one's very existence, or the essence of one's being. So it's not exactly a faith. A faith can change. Someone can be a Hindu today and a Muslim tomorrow, or a Muslim today and an atheist tomorrow. This can change, but what is the essence of our very being? That is the meaning of dharma. So when you say religion, and when I say religion, and when someone else says religion, they may all be thinking of different things. So it's very important to define these terms properly. Otherwise, I can be saying something and you can be understanding something else. So, in short, is religion a spiritual science? Yes, but we should understand very clearly what this means. Again, spiritual is another word which many people use, but they don't think very deeply what it means or try to understand what it means. What does it actually mean? Well, you can say, well, different people define it in different ways, but there are authoritative sources of understanding this. That particularly means the Vedas, the Vedic literature. Veda means knowledge. Veda means that knowledge which is beyond time and space, which is always true. What is called knowledge today might be considered non-knowledge tomorrow. It might be considered, what is considered right today might be considered wrong tomorrow. Just like so many people at school, they were taught that Pluto is a planet, and then it got deplanetized, and it's not a planet anymore. It used to be knowledge to call Pluto a planet, and now Pluto is not called a planet. And now I just saw in the paper today that they're maybe going to replanetize it. So this is not knowledge. This is not scientific knowledge where it's changing all the time. The Veda means fixed knowledge from beyond time and space, which teaches us the most important beginning teaching is to teach what is spiritual. What is the difference between material and spiritual? Now this is a big topic. Basically, spiritual means that which is Sat Chit Ananda, that which is eternal, full of clear, pure consciousness, and full of happiness. And the material situation is Asat Achit Nirananda, means that everything that is material is temporary, it has a beginning and an end, there's no clear understanding of anything, and there's no real happiness. So this material world is asat, achit, nirananda. Everything here is temporary. Everything here is full of the hope of happiness, but no real happiness. And there's no clear understanding of anything. So spiritual means, plainly, that which pertains to spirit. If we're to understand what spirit is, first of all we have to understand who we are. I am a spiritual being. You are a spiritual being. Generally, if we ask someone who you are, we'll think in terms of the body. But everything in terms of the body is material. That means it's temporary. The body is temporary. That means that the designations that go with the body, if we ask, they're also temporary. Therefore, they are material. If we ask someone, what is your name? My name is Sanjeev Chaudhary, someone may say. My age is 24. I'm a software engineer from Mumbai. So he may say all these things, but these are all temporary. There's Sanjeev Chaudhary. Anyway, the name is arbitrary. If you say he's 24 years old, then 25 years ago there was no such person. Well, there may have been someone with that name, but not that particular, not connected with that particular body. And after 3 times 24 years, that body will be gone, that identity will be gone, that designation will be gone. Mumbai will also be gone. It didn't exist 300, how long is it, 200 years ago or something. It was a fishing village. And now it's a big city. And now in course of time, that will all go away also. So spiritual means that which is eternal, that which is beyond everything temporary and miserable and full of illusion in this world. We are all spiritual beings. This we learn from the Vedas. Veda means knowledge, actual knowledge, spiritual knowledge from beyond time, beyond death. So this is not some kind of religion where you just have to believe, but Veda means knowledge, actual knowledge. We should know clearly what is spiritual knowledge, that we are spiritual beings. I am not this body. Good. I'm glad of that, because it's going to be dead soon, but I won't be dead. This body will die, but I won't die. I will continue to exist, because I'm a spiritual being. That's called Atma. So rather than talk of religion in terms of faith, we should talk in terms of spiritual understanding, spiritual knowledge. Otherwise, it's a very risky business. I understood this when I was a kid growing up in England, that I was taught that, well, if you don't believe this religion that I was raised in, then you go to hell forever. I thought, oh, this is really, it's really tough. Go to hell forever sounds really bad. But then someone else comes from some other religion and says, no, you have to believe our religion, otherwise you go to hell forever. In your religion, they're wrong, you go to hell forever. And there's no way to understand. It's just based on, it's one blind faith against another. So actually, real religion must be a spiritual science of understanding, not just blind faith. So many people nowadays are becoming atheists. One reason is because those who talk in terms of religion just expect people to follow with blind faith. But we who are, by the great mercy of Bhagavan Krishna, followers of his teachings in Bhagavad Gita, we are not enjoined to follow anything with blind faith. In Bhagavad Gita, which is the essence of all the Vedas, Krishna tells us, Jnanam teham savijnanam idam vakshami asheshataha yajgatva neha bhuyo nyajgata vyamavasheshate. As one of the 700 verses from Bhagavad Gita in the original Sanskrit. Krishna says, I will now teach you that jnana, that knowledge, and that vijnana, that science. I will now describe that to you in detail, by knowing which there will be nothing more to be known. In other words, we can get full knowledge of this spiritual science. What does it mean, a spiritual science? Generally, when we think of science, we think of something that is measurable, verifiable, practical, the very term spiritual science might seem to us to be oxymoronic. Oxymoronic means it doesn't make sense. It's something like saying a square circle or something like that, or salty sugar, something like that. It just doesn't fit. A kind murderer, something like this. So spiritual science, it may seem to be, the very term may seem to be self-contradictory, because we think of religion as being something, well, you just believe it. But I can say for myself, the reason I believe in this path of Krishna consciousness is because it is a spiritual science. There is a methodology a set methodology which you can follow to get a certain result. Just like in science, I must admit, I wasn't very good at studies in school. I never had much interest in it, but one of the few things I can remember is demonstrating, supposed to demonstrate how water is composed of hydrogen and oxygen, that you burn hydrogen in an atmosphere of oxygen, and then you condense it, and then you get water. So that's a simple experiment. That's a scientific experiment which proves that that water is formed from hydrogen and oxygen. But even to do that experiment, you have to have faith. Here's a phial of hydrogen. Well, how do I know it's hydrogen? I have to believe the teacher. And then he tells us that in the atmosphere there's so much oxygen. You have to believe that. So to do any science, you have to start with some kind of faith. So similarly, in understanding spiritual science, there has to be some kind of faith. If at the outset you reject it and say, nah, I don't believe all this. We never saw anything spiritual in a microscope or a telescope or a stethoscope or any other scope. There are so many scopes. So we don't believe it. Well, that's a silly thing to say, because there's a certain scientific methodology for every branch of science. For instance, don't bring a microscope if you want to study the stars. And don't bring a telescope if you want to study biological cells. One is for macrovision and the other is for microvision. There's a certain methodology for every science. If we want to study the history of Mumbai, then a microscope's not going to help us. There's a certain methodology for every endeavor, every system of knowledge. So there is a spiritual science. That spiritual science is described in Bhagavad Gita and other Vedic texts, that one is working with oneself. One has to purify the consciousness. We are spirit. When we speak of spiritual, what are we talking about? We're talking about consciousness. That is the difference between spirit and matter. This shirt, kurta, that I'm wearing, there's no consciousness. The body, there's consciousness. Where does the consciousness come from? It's not the chemicals. Chemicals don't have consciousness. It's because of the presence of the Atma within the body. As soon as the Atma, the soul, leaves the body is called dead. It was dead anyway, but it appears to be alive as long as the spirit is there. So spiritual means concerned with the Atma. And the Atma, being a person, not only has senses, sensations, but also feelings, desires, and desires can be pure or impure. So spiritual science means to purify the consciousness, to become free from lust, greed, anger, illusion, envy, attachment to temporary things. This is the spiritual science. There are processes for purifying the consciousness. So when we say, is religion a spiritual science? Well, it depends what you mean by religion. If we say just a religion that you follow blindly, and well, it's not a spiritual science. In spiritual science, there should be theoretical knowledge and practical application. So actual religion begins with understanding I am spiritual, every living being is spiritual, the difference between spirit and matter, and acting on the spiritual platform for purifying the consciousness. There are various techniques for purifying the consciousness. These are, we can say that these techniques are scientific. Just like in science there are techniques for instance, smelting iron ore. There are scientific techniques by which extracted iron ore is smelted and purified. So from the iron ore, iron is produced. And then there are techniques for converting iron into steel. So these are scientific techniques. So similarly, there are scientific techniques for purifying the consciousness. And the most powerful technique is chanting the names of God. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. This is the Maha Mantra, the greatest, most powerful mantra. Mantra, the science of mantra is scientific. If chanted with a certain mantras, if chanted in certain ways, can have very, very powerful effects, even materially. Previously, there were people who, by the power of their tapas, their austerity, by chanting mantras, they could do all kinds of things. They could kill people, bring people back to life, and all kinds of things. This Maha Mantra, it means the great mantra, is the most powerful mantra because it's the names of God, and it purifies our consciousness if chanted with faith. It is verifiable. The effect is there. We say science, it should be verifiable. So I am one example among many of persons who come from a background of a very sinful background, with no knowledge of God, no knowledge of Krishna, who by chanting this Maha Mantra have become purified in consciousness. At least we can say this much, that we no longer have interest in gross material activities or meat eating, gambling, illicit sex, intoxication. So it is verifiable, but some faith is required also. Now if you say faith, then you say, oh, it's not scientific. But in science, faith is also required. Just like that experiment, burning hydrogen in an atmosphere of oxygen. You have to have faith it's hydrogen. Another example I can give from my school life, because for me science means what I studied at school, and for most people it is also. They just, as soon as you leave school, you can just forget it all because there's no practical application for most of it. So I remember in school, in mathematics class, the first time we were doing calculus. The teacher put on the board this big squiggle. And I remember looking at it and thinking, whoa, what's that? That looks really tough. This looks like we've got some really tough subject coming up. And naturally, I didn't understand anything. And even now, after so many years, I forgot it all. The only thing is, when I see that squiggle, I can't remember what it's called, then I recognize it's calculus. But how to solve calculus, differential calculus, and there's some other kind of calculus, I forgot altogether, I must admit. Anyway, I'm just making the point that when I first saw that, I thought, oh, this looks really tough. How am I going to understand this? But I had the faith that there is a system of solving calculus problems. It's a worked out science and technique, and the teacher is capable to teach me. So if I apply my mind with that basic faith, I also should be able to understand it. So I'm just citing this to give the example that in spiritual science also, one has to approach with some basic faith that there is something tangible and substantial here. And then one can begin to make progress. One has to apply oneself to the process. Then one can make progress. So some faith is required in any science. Religion is generally taken to be only faith, but real religion should be a spiritual science. inasmuch as one should be able to apply oneself to the process by the various techniques. There are various do's and do nots. One should chant the holy names of Krishna. One should associate with saintly persons. When we say the names of Krishna, of course, we don't deny. There are other religious paths that you can chant the names according to the religious process that you are comfortable with. So we don't say that you only have to chant the name of Krishna. You can chant the name of Jesus, you can chant the name of Allah. The name of Krishna, of course, if we discuss scientifically, then we'll find the name of Krishna has a very deep meaning. But chanting the name of God, associating with saintly people, for food, only taking pure food which is offered to Krishna. These are all the things we should do. Then there are things we shouldn't do because they will agitate the consciousness, they will de-spiritualize the consciousness, such as watching most of what comes on TV and what comes on movies, and discussing all kinds of useless things which have nothing to do with spiritual realization, avoiding sinful activities, which includes eating foods which are produced by gross violence, that includes meat. So there are do's and do nots. It's a big science, but yes, real religion must be a spiritual science. Hare Krishna.